for a decade, I've been thinking about things like digital democracy. I actually, and it's funny because not people call it different terms. I think you're maybe the first person in a long time that I've heard use that term. I'm not saying it's not it's like not a term that a lot of people use. I just don't hear many people using it. I actually I own still the subreddit Digital Democracy.
Nice.
Because in my youth, I came up with I still am very idealistic, but I was looking for alternatives, and I was a technologist, a bit nerdy, I like computers, and I realized, like, wait a minute, like, we've got the internet, we've got this global communication system, but we're still using this system of government that was invented like 300 years ago, where people had to ride on horseback to go to the Senate or the Parliament, right? That's why it's representative, because everyone can't just go to the Senate, right? Everyone can't just turn up. And so you would pick someone to kind of do that for you. You'd have a town meeting, you would speak to your representative, and then they would, at some later point in time, go and pass that message on. I kind of realized this realization that, and I'm not saying it's like nefarious, but it definitely seemed really strange to me that there wasn't anyone talking about it. Even the most progressive people, and I'm talking about like a decade ago, even more so this holds now. Like, why aren't people talking about this? Why can't I vote on, things happening in my local? Why isn't there some government app, right? And we're sort of getting away from blockchains here. Let's just talk, just for the sake of this topic, the traditional system. Why isn't there some app, right, where it not only allows me to vote but also informs me? It gives me sources, and citations, etc., etc. Gives me all the information, so it's an informed vote. It's not just go on the app, click, 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 vote, yes, 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 yes. And just like I guess in the same way you could introduce mechanisms to sort of force the education, so to speak. So in the same way that one of the features that Twitter introduced a while ago, like maybe a year ago, a couple of months ago now, I forget. But I really like this idea because what they did, obviously there was this kind of campaign against misinformation or disinformation. And now I've learned a term recently, malinformation. There's like three categories. And, I was skeptical of that because I'm generally skeptical of power structures, whether I agree or disagree, whether I think, COVID misinformation is bad, or I don't like Alex Jones, or, whatever it is. I'm always going to be skeptical of the power structure rather than like the individuals that are being criticized. It doesn't mean I won't take that take into account their critique of the individuals, but I'm always more on the side of the people. At least when I first get into something, that's kind of the view I take. But what I did like was they introduced a feature where it was basically it was neutral, right? It wasn't this information is bad, so we're going to block it or ban it, or you can't read it, or don't share it, or anything like that. What it did, they actually introduced this feature where if you go to retweet some kind of article, it will bring up a prompt on your screen that will say, you haven't read, or it seems like you haven't read this article, you didn't click the link, are you sure you want to share it?
Before you say something stupid.
Yeah, but that's like a really nice sort of like, that sort of aligned with my idea of how we should educate people. It's like, okay, they're not saying anything about the article, they're just saying, maybe look into it, do the research, like educate yourself before you start pushing this out to other people, and it might damage people, it might be harmful. And so in the same way, to get back to the point, and this is just one mechanism. There's plenty of other ways we could do this, but yeah, you could have some kind of app, and it would educate the users, and I don't think obviously it's fine and dandy having all these like ideas, pie in the sky, head in the clouds kind of stuff. Oh, wouldn't it be great if everyone could vote on everything? But I actually don't think it's that unrealistic, right? Well, especially when we look at the blockchain tech we've got now. And then you consider the fact that the government in pretty much every country, at least every Western country, runs most of the education system, right? And the universities and the colleges, which is where all the smart people are, which is where all the devs are and the coders and stuff. It wouldn't be hard to pull the resources together. That's one thing. And I don't want to get too far off into, just slamming government, but it does amaze me that they kind of have this like stranglehold on the educational system, but like the services and products that they provide like aren't that good. Like you see these like private entities creating better things, and even developers that are doing open source code for free, they can make better platforms than like some of the government stuff. And that just seems really strange to me. I don't know why. Is it some kind of like, is it because of the bureaucracy and that like inherently creates like a lack of imagination, something like that?
I mean, like, I would, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think what I keep in mind with these things, like in a Marxist view, at least, like the government or the state acts as kind of like the arbiter of class relations. That's, the government's sort of like the place where they say, okay, all right, rich people, you get to do this. Okay, we have to give a little bit to the poor people, though. Like as long as those types of people are elected into government, there's like this, there's this openness theoretically that the people will vote in those who have their interests at heart. Of course, in practice, I'd argue that doesn't really happen. So what happens in practice is really like the rich are able to control a lot of what the state does, and like libertarians will argue that, the state are controlling us and what we do. My argument is actually, no, it's the opposite, that it's kind of like the rich people make a lot of money. They make so much money that they can lobby the state, they can lobby politicians to get the type of legislation that they want and keep the sort of conditions in the markets and the economy favorable to them. So like there is not much incentive for a capitalist to want improved public services in like really, like there are maybe some certain things depending on like the type of industry the capitalist is in. They may like want certain things for the government to like pay for and like sort of subsidize for them. But when it comes to like education, I think like, yeah, if education is shit, then they can just sell you this private product to you that they say is better, whenever the state could be doing exactly the same thing if they wanted to, if there's a political will to make that happen. But of course, it's in the interests of capitalists to make sure that that political will never sort of translate into any action. And so like, I agree with you. There is a lot of like, really good resources on the internet now that are, that you don't get from like a public education or something like that. But and as well, people who do it like not with like profit in mind necessarily, just like free videos on YouTube or free courses or whatever. But I think there are like a lot of deeper things involved. That in when it comes to the public education system and that connection with all these different private type of solutions that are coming out now. It's in the favor of these private companies to kind of keep it that way.
Yeah, I mean, just to speak onto what you just said, and also to kind of link it back to, you were talking about like capitalism and sort of paraphrasing here, but it's sort of like a maybe a corrupting force.
Yeah,
and it kind of made me think about what you just said about kind of the government and how you view kind of the difference between like maybe the critique of government and the critique of capitalism, and you kind of think that capitalism could be argued is the bigger problem, and I think in some sense I think there might be a bit of a, I don't know what you would call it. It's not, maybe not a mindset or spiritual or something like that, but there's kind of an aspect of it, at least for me, where I think that capitalism might be sort of like the system or the mechanism by which things operate. But underlying that, there's a philosophy or a mindset of the person that operates inside those systems.
For sure.
And we were talking about, for example, I've been listening to Amir Taki recently talk about the sort of foundations or the roots of crypto and the culture. And he talks about this kind of mindset, right? It's not necessarily always the mechanism, right? It's not like, oh, I'm a capitalist or I'm a communist. It's more this like internal feeling that you have that like, no, I want to help people and I want to liberate people, and therefore the means should justify the ends, and so I'm going to release free software and I'm not going to try and control people. I'm going to try and educate people. And so I think like that's probably quite important to sort of add into the mix, at least when you're doing this, like a broad critique.
Sure.
And I think that's definitely something that we should try and foster. And I think it is, somewhat in the certain crypto communities. There's a lot of good work going. There's a lot of like sort of free software. Most of it, or the majority of it, is open source, open state, etc. But yeah, I think it's more like we should maybe focus on mindset and philosophy, because the internal kind of works its way externally, if that makes sense. That's maybe kind of how I view things. Just like how I feel like I mentioned at the start, I'm like an anarchist, but to me that's more like an internal thing, and then it manifests itself outwardly in how I treat people and how I interact and how I communicate and how I like order my life, that kind of stuff. So yeah, just wanted to kind of add that in.
I guess like what I would say to that is that there's definitely like, I think this perception of kind of like the differences between, like, as if like the main difference between a Marxist and an anarchist is that, one believes that like it's all about the individual and the other one believes it's all about the collective, which I think is like a vast oversimplification. Like to me, it's that I like as me as an individual, I don't create my identity and my personality like on a blank piece of paper starting from new when I'm born, right? I experience the world. I get inputs from around the world to me, and that influences how I believe, what I believe in, like how I live my life, and everything, a lot of different factors. Not to be like I'm not saying that I'm like a complete determinist in that like everything is, like predetermined type of thing. I think there is like agency that we can choose how we respond to, things that come at us in life. But I do think that there, like, to me, I think of capitalism as like this like inescapable system for the most. Like if you're living in a Western country, you're inside the inescapable system of capitalism, and you are from birth being shaped by that system in order to live within it, because we all are animals who want to continue to exist, to continue to live, and to experience life. And so like that sort of informs the way that we think about things as well. So like I do agree with you that there is something about how we think about things and like our internal, what we believe in, and how that manifests itself outwardly. So like to me, this is a cycle. This is like it's called what's called social reproduction. That you learn these things from people above you, from maybe your parents, from your teachers, from your boss, especially, maybe even. And then you internalize those things, and then you reproduce that same type of social relationship with others that is expected of you within capitalism. Like you say, like, it's a good idea to save money, right? Your parents will tell you that, like you will internalize that, you will save money, and then maybe something good will happen because like that's the type of thing that is kind of incentivized under capitalism. Not taking a position on whether or not, saving money is good or bad, but like, under capitalism, like it's a good idea to save money a lot of the time, so that you can pay for things. So like there's like this reproductive loop that we're kind of stuck in, and there is definitely a need to kind of like, which is I think the job of everyone on the left is to try and break that, to try and like, or at least to make people aware that they are stuck in this reproductive loop, even if you are like you know, even if you're me, if you are openly a socialist or whatever, like you are still stuck in that loop because you're stuck within this like very large system that like you as an individual, you cannot break. Like I cannot personally overthrow capitalism, right? And for like anyone to think that they personally can is like I would suggest not to believe that, because that's a pretty depressing thing to think, because it's not going to happen. And so like there is this need for kind of course, like, for lack of a better term, a kind of re-education of how we think about these things and how we, you know, the map of our world. Like, because capitalism provides us a map of the world, and you know, it tells us that basically there are infinite amount of resources. Profit is good. Making money is a good thing. Like, you know, all these different things that we're sold. You know, work a job, whatever. Being an entrepreneur is the best thing that you can possibly be in life. That's how you achieve freedom, et cetera, et cetera. So like it provides you a conceptual map of the world and society and how it works. And we internalize that, and you know, that's kind of like our ideology. It's the thing that we may not be like completely aware of the system that we're living in, but we kind of reproduce it inadvertently. We don't have to understand it in order to reproduce it. And so like I think part of definitely the job of the left is education. It is, you know, teaching people that they are in this larger system that is very difficult. And, you know, you, in order to like elucidate, maybe you feel a particular way, maybe you feel alienated in this world. And, you know, our theory of alienation is, you know, that we're living in capitalism, and it's kind of par for the course. So like there is this need for education, so that if we can rethink, you know, our map of the world, then we can also begin to find the ways in which we can try and change it.